Hey everyone, welcome to Products That Count. I'm Essie Moati. I'm the founder of Products That Count, and we host this speaker series on a monthly basis. Before we get started with Dan's presentation, I want to invite Eric to join me here. Hey, and thank Yelp for being a great host.
Thank you, whistling fan there. Appreciate that. Thank you for coming. I'll be very brief. 2 shameless promotions. So Developer Week is coming up in mid-February, and Yelp is going to be hosting an event here. It's called Reboot at Yelp. You can find it on Eventbrite if you're interested in attending and RSVPing. It's on February 18th. Should be a great event. So if you're interested in that, check that out on Eventbrite. I head up the product team here at Yelp on the consumer side, and we, like everybody in the Bay Area, are hiring. We are hiring product managers, designers, data scientists, circus performers, whatever. It doesn't matter. To go to our career page, yelp.com/careers. You can find someone in a red jacket later, too, if you want to learn more. I'm Eric. Eric@yelp.com is my email address if you want to ask me questions directly. Have a good time tonight. Thanks for listening to me.
There you go. No, I got my mic. I'm good. All right, cool. Well, I'm Dan Olsen. Nice to talk with you guys tonight. Thanks to Yelp for sponsoring. Thanks for having me, SC, to speak. I'm going to stand here between things. All right, cool. Real quick about me. Let's see if this is going here. One sec. Just real quick so you guys know my background. I started out with a technical background as a double E, and then got an MBA, and then after B school I did a lot of web dev and UI design training stuff as well. Been working in PM for over 20 years. I started off actually doing really high-tech stuff, managing submarine design for the Navy, and then after business school I went to Intuit for 5 years, which was an awesome experience. Got to lead the Quick and product management team. After that, basically went to Friendster as head of product. It's the 10-year anniversary of Facebook, so a couple people were calling to interview me about 10 years ago. What was life like at Friendster? It's a long time ago. And then I consulted for a while, and then I basically had an idea. Finally had an idea for a startup that I was passionate about called Your Version that did personalized news. We launched at TechCrunch 50. It won the People's Choice Awards, but like a lot of people, we couldn't raise our A round, and so I went back to consulting again. And some of my clients are Box, YouSendIt, Chartboost, One Medical. I like to go really fast. Usually the audience, I assume they're pretty smart. We can cover a lot of stuff, so don't worry about taking notes. I post all my stuff on SlideShare. We definitely have time at the end for questions. If you have a burning question, definitely ask it. But we have time at the end for questions, okay? And just real quick, I'd love to hear about you guys, your background. Maybe you just raise your hand if on the company. Who's here at a startup? All right, who's at a more established company? Okay, around 70-30. And then how about who's more B2C? And who's more B2B? Oh, we got a nice mix. Cool. And then just function job-wise, who, for lack of a better term, who's a founder or entrepreneur? Say, okay. And who's product management? All right. Who's design? Okay. And development? Any developers in the house? All right, we got some developers. Sweet. Like data scientists, analytics people, marketers. All right. Anybody else we missed? Raise your hand. You're a unicorn. Okay, cool. All right, so the title of the talk is Lean Product Analytics. Lean, I've been given this, not this talk, but talks on lean techniques and principles for a long time. You used to always say, who's heard of it? Raise your hand. Now I ask, who hasn't heard of lean startup? So real quickly, it's about achieving product market fit. It's about testing your hypotheses and learning, validating your MVP with users, just basically iterating quickly. And at the end of the day, it comes from lean. Actually, I have a background in industrial engineering. It comes from lean manufacturing, which was all about minimizing waste. And that really just means using resources effectively. In lean startup, people talk a lot about product market fit, but I like to actually get into the details of what I think what it means and what a product that has product market fit has. And I think it's really 4 things. One is that it meets customer needs. The second is that it's better than the other alternatives that are out there. It's not just a Me Too product. The third is that it's easy to use, and I think that's worth calling out separately from the functional benefits that it provides. And then fourth is it has a good value price. And even if you're in B2C and it's a free product, there's still people's time is a valuable commodity. So you can think about it as like how much share of time are you getting. Those are the 4 attributes that I think contribute to product market fit. I think there's actually an underlying causality model for product market fit that I like to make explicit and share. And I think basically it starts with a customer, and you may explicitly know who that target customer is, or you may not. You may just launch a product, and then it's kind of like you're going fishing and you throw some bait out there and you catch whatever kind of fish you catch, right? So they have needs. They have a lot of different needs. They have different preferences of needs. And then basically you, as a product team, your job is to try to understand those needs and then design and build a product to meet those needs. And then it goes back to the customer, and they get to decide how well the product meets their needs, right? You're doing it, you're building it, hoping it meets their needs and thinking it meets their needs. But they're the ones who get to say that, and that's basically what customer satisfaction is all about. So this is the underlying causality of product market fit, in my opinion. What we're trying to get right is all the assumptions and connections between those key components. So when you're showing your product to people and getting feedback on it, or they're using it, I also like to get explicit about what are the different elements that you're actually getting feedback on. Has anyone here ever done like user testing with a V1 rough product before? Right? You get all kinds of feedback, right? It's kind of a mess. And in my mind, you're really getting feedback on three distinct things. One is the feature set or functionality. That's aimed at providing the functional benefits. The second is the UX design, right? You may have built this awesome back-end data engine thing that can do like book a flight in 2 seconds or something, a millisecond. But if the UX design is horrible, it's not going to matter to people. And there's actually a third component that when you're doing early V1 testing, you get a lot of feedback on. In fact, I think most of the feedback you get is actually on this first. And that's actually messaging. Right? Like you're showing someone some balsamic wireframe or some low fidelity thing, and they're like, what do you mean? Like, let me think of something that somebody did. Like, what do you mean scenario? Like one of my clients is doing financial planning. What do you mean scenario? What do you mean strategy? What do you mean plan? I don't know what that means. So just the terminology can get in the way with people, right? And so I actually recently gave a talk on messaging market fit, where I kind of did a deep dive on that. It's available on SlideShare if you want. We won't cover messaging too much here, but just recognize that when people are reacting, or same thing with your landing page, right? We all know if you've done A/B optimization on landing page, changing certain words can have a big difference. So those are the three components of when you're getting customer feedback. You're getting feedback on those. When you're doing validation of your product with customers, it's a very different kind of task to tackle, depending on whether it's a new product or an existing product. Right? Pre-launch or post-launch, V1 or beyond V1. For a new product, you don't have a big sample size. It's all about qualitative discussion, just showing people mock-ups, but still not like thousands or millions, right? But it's qualitative data. And so that's like talking to Oprah, having a nice interview with Oprah, you're sitting down, you're just talking about stuff, right? When you have an existing product, now you have analytics going, right? You can actually see, cool, how many people logged in? How many people use feature X? How many people use feature Y? How many people came back? So you actually have hardcore data now, and that's, the realm of Spock. So today we're going to be, talking about Spock stuff. So a lot of my talks, I have a talk that I give a lot called How to Be a Lean Product Ninja that's really mainly focuses on the qualitative, the Oprah side. So if you want to learn about that, and they're both important and relevant, but today I'm going to focus, we're going to get our Spock on tonight. We're going to talk about analytics. So, and what I like to do also is just lay out a high-level process that you can follow. It's a repeatable process that you can basically use systematically to optimize your product over time. And it starts off by basically identifying what are the metrics for your product or your business. And we'll go into each of these in more detail, and I have several examples to share. But that's where it starts. The next is, great, okay, we've identified these metrics. Where are we now? Let's get some baseline values on how we're doing with those metrics right now. And then the next is, great, now that we've got some baseline metrics, let's look at these metrics and decide which ones do we think we can really improve and which ones are going to have a big impact if we do improve them. Right? And this is all at the global overall product business level. Once you decide on which metric basically has the top prospects, and you pick that metric and say, cool, we're going to focus on this metric, whether it's retention or conversion rate or whatever it is, basically. And then we get into basically a metric level process. And that process is basically, great, we decided we want to improve this specific metric. Let's get together as a product team and brainstorm all the ideas we can think of to improve that. And then basically try to have some kind of assessment of what's the ROI of all those different ideas. And we'll go into the details on this. And then we pick the idea that we want to implement, we design, implement it, and we launch it, and we see what happens with the metric. Right? And so this is a loop that you get in while you're trying to optimize that metric. And basically, as you go through the loop, each time you're learning and you're iterating and you're trying, sometimes you'll go through the loop and the metric won't move. And it's okay because you're actually just getting a lot of learnings, and you're going to invalidate hypotheses, you're going to come up with new hypotheses, new things to test. And then after you've kind of made a lot of improvements in a certain metric, it may be time to go back and say, cool, we've okay, retention, we've kind of got that. Now let's go focus on monetization, or let's go focus on something else. So it's time to go back to the global level. Let's figure out what the next highest priority metric to work on is. So this is kind of the overall schematic of the process, I think the kind of rental framework to use that I've seen be successful when you want to try to use analytics to optimize your product or your business. One thing to cover real quick, we're all about hardcore data, and NoSQL and big database, terabytes, petabytes, all that jazz. Surveys are also another kind of quantitative, and they sit kind of between the qualitative and the quantitative because you're asking these questions and people can write things in and you're asking whys, but it's like basically at scale, statistically significant scale. So as everyone, I'm sure most people have heard of Net Promoter Score. That's a good general overall metric for your overall product that people use. It's kind of a standard phrasing of a question. How likely are you recommend this product to a colleague or friend? There's a scale from 0 to 10, and it's kind of a harsh calculation. You only get credit for 9s and 10s, and those are called promoters. So someone's got to give you a 9 and a 10 to get credit. And then 7 and 8s are passive. They're just neutral. They don't count positive or negative. But then everybody from 6 down is a detractor. And what you do is you add up the number of people that were here, a percentage, or number or percentage, and you add up the percentage here and you subtract them. So you can actually have a negative NPS score. It goes from negative 100 to a positive 100. And for different categories, some categories, like rental car companies or something, or financial institutions, they might have lower NPS. So it's about relative to your category. But you basically want to track this over time, and this is a good kind of overall metric. The key thing, though, is, and this is the problem with the Spock approach, is you'll find out all this data, and you just don't know why. You don't know why this is happening. You don't know why people are saying this. So it's important to have follow-up questions when you do these surveys about, hey, why did you give the score you did? Both on the positive side and the negative. What did you like about us? And then I've seen a lot of people also ask a follow-up question, hey, for the negative people, what do we need to do to improve? And that qualitative data that you get can be very valuable to help improve your score over time. And basically, we can kind of geek out and focus on the quantitative, but the qualitative, going back and forth can be very valuable, and it complements it, basically. So the quantitative tells you what's happening, what are users doing, what's going on with the metrics. But the qualitative, talking to people, doing usability, doing user testing, actually tells you why whatever you're seeing is happening. So they're both valuable. Another kind of product market fit validation technique that's out there is from Sean Ellis. He started out at Survey.io. It's now Koala Root. And this question basically it kind of focuses on the opposite. How bad would you feel? How would you feel if you could no longer use product X? Kind of saying, hey, what if we took this away? How sad would you be? And he has these 3 answers: very disappointed, somewhat not. And it varies again by category, but the general guideline is, hey, once 40% of people that you're talking to and asking this to say very disappointed, you've kind of achieved product market fit. And the whole point is, when you ask this question on your rough private beta, 40% of people aren't going to say that. And so over time, you hope that percentage goes up as you make improvements. Now, those are surveys. That's asking people questions. Actual user behavior trumps opinions, right? Because when you're asking someone, you're talking to someone, it's valuable. It's definitely better than just sitting in the ivory tower and saying, I think people are going to like this, and coding it and launching it. It's better to get out and at least talk to people qualitatively. But at the end of the day, they're saying, I think I would do this. You're showing them wireframe. I think I would do this. I think I would do this. I think I would do this. And they may or may not do that when they actually get in front of the real product. The other biggest factor is the fact that you're at their side, right? If you're doing landing page user testing, the conversion rate you're going to see on a one-on-one test is going to be high. No one's going to say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to click on that. Test over, bye. Right? You're going to be like, I got 100% conversion rate from my user testing. But you know that if you launch it in the wild, it ain't going to get 100%. So just the fact that you're sitting there kind of can perturb and influence the results. But again, this is very valuable, especially early on, to get this data. Now, when you're observing behavior in contrast, you're actually seeing what they actually do. How many people logged in? How many people did click on that landing page button? And you're not there. So it's much more, it's real world, right? And then, so if we think of behavioral metrics now for product market fit, there are a lot of them basically that you could, that basically indicate you've got good product market fit. So if a lot of prospects are signing up on your landing page and your registration page, you basically would have a high conversion rate. And what that means is, hey, they haven't even used your product yet, but the way you're talking about it on these landing pages and on your registration pages is really resonating with people. So they're like, cool, that sounds good. If you have that, I want that. I'm going to sign up. Now, when you get in there, they may or may not like your UI or your feature set and things like that, but at least you're doing a good job there. Then if they get in the front door and they use it, and then they keep coming back, they keep using it, and you have a high retention rate, that's another good indicator, right? That means, cool, not only did we do a good job getting them in the front door, but now they kicked the tires and used it, and they're coming back to use it again. Another deeper metric would be, hey, they're using it often. Not only are they coming back and using it, but hey, we've got some power users that can't get enough of our product. They're using it like 5 times a day, 10 times a day. Facebook's case, 100 times a day. And then the other one would be like they're deeply engaged with it. Whether or not they're using it with high frequency, it's like when they use it, they go deep dive, like a lot of games measure session times and things like that. So that's another measure of engagement. And then finally, of course, is, they pay for it. Right? If someone's pulling out their credit card or their wallet or PayPal and paying for it, then that's a validation that you're providing value. So there are a lot of metrics that can help us, give us confidence and have evidence that we're providing product market fit. When you're doing analytics, I think it's very valuable to have a holistic framework. There are a lot of different frameworks out there. I have my own. It's pretty similar to Dave McClure. Who's heard of Startup Metric for Pirates? Oh, not that many people. Good. All right, I can show this. So Luca has, of course. So Dave McClure, who's heard of Dave McClure? All right, cool, that's good. So before he was an investor as active, he used to give a lot of talks, actually, a lot of these kind of concepts. And so he came up with this framework. Someone drew this nice diagram of it, where it's basically acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral, and the acronym forms R, so that's where like the pirate piece comes in. So anyway, and I had a similar framework. Referral, it can be important if you have a social or viral product. Sometimes it may not be important, but these other ones definitely are common and important. Acquisition, how do users, find you? How good are you doing at acquiring people to your website? Prospects. Activation, I call this conversion myself, but same thing, hey, when they get in, do they convert to whatever, RegFlow, or give you their email address or whatever it is? Retention, we just discussed, do they come back? Revenue, are they paying you? Are they generating revenue for you from their activities? And then referrals that they tell others. So it can just be very helpful to have some overall framework before you dive into individual metrics to know. And the important thing, I think, is just focusing on the right metric at the right time. Right? So I've seen a lot of companies, they'll focus a lot on acquisition, and they're basically sending a lot of prospects to a very leaky bucket because their conversion rate is really low. They haven't quite gotten the right messaging on how to talk about their product, and so they're spending all this money in optimizing their Google AdWords and things like that, but it doesn't really matter. So kind of optimizing conversion before acquisition is a generally accepted kind of best practice that people do. Also, I would argue it's best also to focus on retention, because you can even convert those people and they get in your product and they're like, I don't really like this product. So most people start out with retention and then move their way to conversion, and then tackle either revenue or acquisition. But depending on what space you're in, you may want to validate revenue earlier. If you're a product that's going to be heavily reliant on sharing and viral growth, then you're going to want to validate this earlier and look at your K factors and all that jazz. So basically, you just want to think about for your space, what's the top metric area we should be focusing on right now. And we're talking about product market fit because we're talking about lean startup, but you can also use that same analytics framework to optimize just business results and user experience, and we'll talk through some examples of that. Now, when I want to optimize something, basically people are like, hey, I want to optimize my business results, but I don't really know where to start. When I like to optimize something, it's kind of like the old school calculus, derivative stuff. It's I want it to be an equation so that I can kind of get my head around it quantitatively and mathematically. And so the interesting thing is you can actually express any of your businesses as an equation if you try and if you think about it. And so a lot of people go, oh, I don't know how to do that, Dan. I always start with profit equals revenue minus cost. That applies to every business. It's just very high level and unactionable. And so what we're going to do is, for an advertising business in this case, break it down, and I call it peeling the onion and going down, down, down until we get to actual metrics that are actionable, that we can kind of try to influence and control and move. So if we look at, for an ad business revenue, it's unique visitors times the ad revenue per visitor that we're getting. Right? We can multiply those two numbers and it'll equal revenue. We can further drill down on the ad revenue per visitor as the product of impressions per visitor, effective CPM divided by 1,000, right? That's the formula if we write it out. And then if you keep going for impressions, it's it's visits per visitor times page views per visits times impressions per page view. And, this is for a given time period, for a month, a year, a week, whatever time period you want. And so we could write out revenue as this long formula of all these things. And now, instead of having some high-level revenue number, we have specific actionable things. We can say, hey, how can we get more visits per visitor per month? Maybe we start doing some reminder emails or something. How can we get more page views per visit? Well, we can slap more ad impressions. We can break our content up like a lot of news sites do into multiple pages. So there's a lot, at this point, they're actionable. Back on the visitor side, This is a very important distinction to make as new versus returning, just so you can see what's going on. And say your site does have some kind of invitation process or sharing process, you can break your new visitors into invited versus uninvited, and then you can further break down invited into some like traditional viral loop kind of metrics if you want. So we started out with like a high level unactionable thing, but now we've got a lot of detailed actionable metrics that we could have a discussion about in our company. Where are we at on those metrics? Which ones do we think are going to have the biggest needle? And it literally is just multiplication and addition. So if we move this by, if we double this, it's going to double that, basically, the way the math, if you do the math. Or this one, if we double any of these ones, it'll double that, basically. Just to cover quickly a subscription business model, another one real quick. Instead of advertising, for revenue, you've got paying users times your average revenue per paying user. For paying users, you've got new ones plus repeat. For repeat, it's basically the previous that you had from the previous time period times 1 minus their cancellation rate. Back on the paying users, maybe you have some free trial and there's some conversion rate from trial to your paid service. On the trial, maybe you've got different marketing channels that you're working on, and you can aggregate the total number of visitors you're getting times the conversion rate for the trial. Again, you can break it down into actual metrics. And there's not just one way to break these down, there's different ways you can break it down. And you want to figure out the way that makes the most sense for you to get on those actual high impact metrics. As far as tracking them, I think at a minimum you should have daily. I mean, you can do more real time if you want for sure, but at a minimum, I like to think of these as time series, and basically, each date is a row, and each of these columns, data metrics that I'm tracking is a column. And you want to track that data, and what becomes more powerful is when you actually start creating what I call ratio metrics. You don't just take the raw numbers, you actually take ratios of the metrics. So, for example, say your CEO came in and said, hey, how good's our registration page doing? And you could go and you look at the absolute number. It's like, hey, we had 200,000 registrations yesterday. We're doing great. It's like, well, maybe you were just on TechCrunch yesterday, and that's why you got that. It didn't have nothing to do with your registration page. But if instead you look at the conversion rate, which is how many people that came to the page, let's just divide into that basically the number of people that registered. Now we've got a percentage that goes from 0 to 100, apples to apples. We can track it over time. We can compare it to other products. So these ratio metrics are where the real power can come in to have it be normalized and trackable and comparable over time. As an example, this is like a site I worked on a while ago. We had a registration page, a single registration page, and this is like 9 months of data. It goes from 0 to 100%. And the interesting thing here is if you just at a big picture level, it goes from 30% to 90% in the span of 90 days or whatever, or 9 months. Sorry, 9 months. That's like a 3x difference in 9 months. And there's a bunch of big shifts. The interesting thing is because I was tracking this, I know every shift here was from a change that we made, either deliberately or accidentally. And so let's walk through it real quick. So basically we were tracking along here around 35%, and this was a product you didn't have to register. It had like a non-registered, you could use certain features. If you registered for free, you could use more features, and then if you paid, you could use even more features. So we changed the messaging on, hey, these features that you're going to get if you register and why it's better, and we saw a pop in the registration. This steady increase here was me basically doing usability testing and looking at error logs and finding where were people getting tripped up on the registration page. People aren't, we don't have little validation of passwords. When their passwords don't match, we're not telling them in the JavaScript, all this stuff, right? Just kind of streamlining the UI, solving usability issues, and cleaning up the page so it was really minimalistic, and it got to here. Marketing looked at this minimalistic registration page and said, that's awesome. We have room to slap on some demographic questions now. And so I was like, don't do it. You're going to take a hit on the rate. And sure enough, they did it, and then boom, we went down when they added those questions, right? Because basically the more effort that there is, the fewer the percentage of people are going to go through it. And then basically at some point we finally said, you know what, there are a couple key features we're going to move out of not requiring registration to requiring, and we saw a huge spike up. So anyway, this is kind of how you track a ratio metric, and again, when you're trying to proactively make metrics improvements, it's great to have, but it's also great to have just to play defense in case somebody pushes some code that does something dumb and all of a sudden you don't know what's going on. So you're flying blind if you're not tracking these key metrics anyway. Does anybody know what this is? Maybe. Yeah. Similar. You're warm. This has a specific name. And it's okay if you don't. I'm just curious. If anybody did, I'd be really impressed.
It looks like a communication.
All right. So this...
Your design?
No, it's not my design. That looks pretty bad. This is actually what's called a gauge board. Now it makes sense, right? It's a bunch of gauges on a board. So this is actually from a battleship. It could be from a submarine, but it's from a battleship. And the interesting thing I like as a metaphor is you've got all these dials, gauges and dials, letting you know what's going on with this complicated propulsion plant, right? this complicated machinery. And you've got these big valves that you can actually, you're going to turn this and some of these dials are going to move and things are going to happen. It's kind of like your business. These are all the key metrics of your business. And these are whatever dials you have, right? Hey, this may be retention rate. This may be like revenue per user. This could be whatever. It's like that's how I mentally think about optimizing metrics. Each of these metrics is a gauge or a dial, right? This is our conversion rate. This is our retention rate. This is our whatever you want to call it. It's a dial. It's got a min value. It's got a max value. I picked one that went to 100 to kind of represent a percentage, but there are non-percentage metrics too. And so you want to just be mindful of what's the min value, max value, and where's the dial right now. This, imagine the dial was up here. It's got some current value. So anyway, that's like the best mental model I think of for analytics and metrics is just, hey, these key metrics are these gauges, and what I want to do is figure out how to move the needle up, right? In most cases, you're moving the needle up. Maybe for churn rate, you're moving it down, but most of them you're trying to move it up. So then, it's like, great, we have different ideas for how to move that needle up on that key metric. This is where the ROI part comes in, okay? And so ROI stands for return on investment. The return is basically how much value are we creating? Like back to that formula, if I increase this metric by like 1%, what's the impact that's going to have on revenue by working through that formula that we did on the equation of the business, right? So we can actually quantify it. Now there's a certain amount of uncertainty associated with it for sure, there's uncertainty bands, but we still have some expected value. We can have, if nothing else, a gut check on, hey, we think this one's more valuable than this one. So I've got value kind of going quantitatively here. And over here, typically, it's just the investments. Like, what do we got to spend? What's the resource we got to expend to use this? Typically, it's developer weeks. Maybe cash or cost or time or other stuff, but typically it's developer time. It's developer time, right? And so, say we're talking about two different ideas for how to move that needle, and they're both going to roughly, move the needle just as much and create just as much impact in revenue, but one's going to take twice as much effort. We would obviously pick the one that's going to take half the effort. It's got higher ROI. Sometimes there are ideas you have that offer kind of the similar ROI. It's like, hey, we can get 2 units of value for 2 units of investment, or we can get 4 for 4. They both offer kind of an ROI of 1. I always go for the smaller one because you're going to get it done quicker. It's going to get in the market quicker. You're going to realize the value quicker. And, if you got something wrong, you're going to realize it quicker and you're going to be able to pivot. So it's just better. That's the whole kind of agile, breaking things down. Let's not do big things. There are obviously bad ideas out there. Right? People go, I think we should, let's gamify our product. Let's put gamification on, right? It's gamification. It's an invoicing software. Well, let's just gamify it. I don't care. The VP was very smart, right? So there's, it's got, and the people, these projects, the engineers go off and they spend 6 months, you launch it, doesn't move the needle. So what we want to do as product people is find these ideas up here that no one else is thinking about, these other opportunities no one else is seeing, high return, low investment. And then I think really, really good product people are able to start with a core idea here and then work with developers and figure out, okay, how can we break it down and get the core and the essence and 80-20 this thing so that we really don't need that other screen, we don't need this thing, let's just cut down the I without losing much R. And then once you've done this for that particular metric, you now can kind of you stack rank these and you kind of get a typical diminishing returns curve. Cool, we're going to do A first, we're going to do B first, we're going to do C first. Back to that loop in that process. We're going to start trying A out, we're going to do B and then C. So that's kind of approaching it from an ROI standpoint. And what you want to do is kind of think that way about all the key metrics and figure out what are the critical few, right? And really it comes down to what's the upside potential, how many resources are going to take to move the needle. If I have a developer on that for 1 month, how far are they going to be able to move that needle? 1%, 2%? And then what's the revenue impact going to be? And let's prioritize everything and figure out what's up. And when you do that, you end up seeing just a handful, really 3 different profiles. Often a lot of these will have a good ROI curve. So this is the ROI curve. This is all the best ideas that you could possibly execute on. The yellow dot is where you are today. Okay, we're here today, and we have, that's pretty good because with a little bit of investment we can move up pretty high. It's a good slope there, right? There are other places where it's a bad ROI. You're up here on the flatter part of the curve. Maybe you've already tried to optimize this page a lot. It's already squeezed all the, low-hanging fruit out, and it's like, Jesus, I don't know what else we can do. Or it's just some complex thing that you can't simplify. The third profile, this is what I try to find. These do exist. They may look like, yeah, sure, that's an awesome curve you just drew, Dan, but they really do exist. And I'll walk you through a couple examples whereby analyzing the situation, you can really see, hey, I can just, by doing a little bit of effort and fixing this one thing, I think it'll have a big effect. And so those definitely, silver bullet kind of opportunities do exist. Especially when you're just doing it for the first time and no one's been optimizing, there's a few of these hanging around usually. After you've knocked those out, then you're more back to here. So I want to walk through a couple case studies real quick to illustrate the application of this process and show kind of before and after results. So when I was at Intuit, we launched a brokerage called Quicken Brokerage. This particular one is about improving UX and also improving business roles, specifically sign up, getting people to this conversion through the sign up process. So when we launched, this is basically showing abandonment rate. So this is like 1 minus conversion rate. How many people did not get through the start of the process? And this is just time over here. And so you can see it was like around 60%. So 60% of people who started the sign-up flow for this brokerage didn't get through. That's pretty bad. Now, part of the problem is there was our web flow, there was our partner broker web flow, and it's a very regulated legal environment. There's all these questions you got to ask, and are you a savvy investor, and what's your net worth? There's all these things that just, it's unfortunate that it was very complicated. We knew it didn't have to be as complicated as it was, but for V1 that we launched, it was. So we said, you know what, that's not good. We want to fix that. So we identified, hey, this is one of our high priority metrics. And we said, cool, what can we do about it? So the next thing that we did is say, cool, let's look at the flow and let's just see where people are dropping off throughout the flow. And so for me, this is that peeling the onion and saying, cool, we identified the high priority metric. Now let's go into that user experience and break it down and see where's the biggest opportunity. So the biggest opportunity was here. This is where the biggest drop actually happens. So we said, great, we're going to peel the onion and focus on that now, peel another layer and focus on that. And it had to do with the first step of sign-in and registration. What we did is we basically said, cool, let's describe the user experience and what pages are you going through. And then we said, let's instrument what percentage of people are going where and where they're dropping off. It's kind of a busy chart, but it's not too complicated flow. You either like sign in if you already had an account or you register. Signing in, a lot of people forget their password. This is very typical. We were actually going to like a brokerage trading platform, so the security level of the password had to go up, so a lot of people had to change it. A lot of people got tripped up there. And so what we did is just to see, great, now let's peel the onion again. Which of these offers the highest ROI opportunity, right? And so we saw this one did because it's 20% of total. This is only 6% of total. That's 10. And then my team, this is where you got as far as you could with the quant. We're like, cool, we know people are having troubles here. I can't redesign that based on what I know. So what we did is we went and did usability testing, and we said, cool, let's watch people going through this and see where they're getting tripped up, right? I mean, you could argue you could have a little bit more instrumentation maybe and see, but not back in 2001. We didn't really do that. So anyway, basically did usability testing, and we realized, okay, and we realized there's different use cases, like 8 different use cases of people based on their account status and things like that. Only 2 of those represented a high percentage of the user base. And, we kind of looked at what were the top usability issues for the top use cases. And we addressed those kind of tactically without worrying about all the other use cases and all the other problems that were lower impact. So we rolled the fix out in like 2 months. It wasn't tons of effort. And basically, we released a new design, and we instantly saw an improvement. It was a 37% improvement. I'd love if it was a double improvement or more. But it was a material improvement for us, and it wasn't that big of a project that we did. So that's an example of kind of before and after. So again, baseline the metric, identify what's the highest upside potential, peel the onion until you get down to the details of, okay, where exactly is the highest ROI. If you need to get into qualitative to figure out what's going on to inform your design, then you do that and you launch it. The second case study is from Friendster, basically. Here, when I was head of product at Friendster, we were very reliant on viral growth. Like, everyone's like, that's how we get new users. And so no one had ever looked at the viral growth to try to optimize it. So I said, cool, as head of product, it was my job to try to do it, so I did. So the first thing that I did is I said, cool, let me actually determine what are the metrics that matter? What are the metrics here? And so this is where a lot of times the metrics and the user experience are they're intertwined, right? They're basically the UX is defining the metrics for you. So the viral loop for us was we had active users, and this applies to most any social product these days. Active users, they invite prospective users. The prospective users either click on the invitation or they don't. If they do click, they get through their registration process. They either get through that or they don't. And then they become users, of which only some people remain active, right? It's this viral loop that we had. So I defined this back in 2004 at Friendster. Said, cool, that's the process. Now what metrics apply here? And again, I want to hopefully find some ratio metrics, not just like absolute metrics. So I said, cool, this I can divide these 2 things and get percentage of users who are active. That's a ratio metric. I can say, hey, what percentage of these active users are inviting? The other thing here would be, when they invite, they don't just send 1. Someone could send 1, someone could send 20. So invites per sender was another key metric relative to this point. On the invite, there was a click-through rate, or what percentage of people actually clicked through. And on the registration, there was a conversion rate, basically. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 metrics that basically applied to this process in trying to grow viral users. If you multiply them together, you get the ratio. And basically, I was like, cool. Now the next step was, which one of these has the highest ROI opportunity? And so we'll do an exercise here, but to narrow it down, we'll just say, let's just focus these 3. So we'll go by raise of hands. Who thinks, you got to pick one of these 3, has the highest ROI opportunity? Who thinks this percentage of users sending invites is the one that we should focus on? 1 brave soul, 2 brave soul, 3, 4 people are voting. All right. And how about invites per sender? Got a few more people. And how about conversion rate? Ooh, a lot of people on conversion rate. Cool. Okay. So we voted before we did the critical step. You don't know what the baselines are yet. I tricked you guys a little bit. So here's the baselines. So this one was at 15%. This one is at 2.3. And this one's 85. Sometimes someone will stop me and say, hey, Dan, where are the baselines at before we do it? So how about we revote? I think some of these people may want to revote, probably, right? Who thinks it's percentage of users sending invites now? All right, it went up, right? See, that's the difference about knowing where you're at. If you don't know where you're at, you don't know what's going on. Invites per sender? Some people sticking to their guns, okay. And then conversion rate? No? Okay, I talked everybody out of it. Okay, cool. So, and I mentioned a couple times the upside potential metric. I want to get specific and quantitative about that now. So these 3 metrics, we had registration process yield. It goes from 0 to 100%, like that gauge that I had. We're sitting at 85%, right? So we can literally quantify what's the max possible improvement. If you came up with the best ideas and the best design in the world, what's the max amount we can move that needle? It's only 15%. And if we divide that by the current value, it's really only an 18% improvement. There's only 18% improvement upside here. On the percentage of users sending invitations, it's also a number from 0 to 100%. It's one of these ratio metrics. It's at 15%. How much upside does that one have? It has 85% upside, theoretically. I'm not saying we could do it, but just kind of like, what's the max theoretical potential upside? And if you divide that by the current value, it's 570%. That sounds a lot better than 18%, right? Probably more low-hanging fruit, higher ROI opportunities here, all other things being equal. The third metric, the average number of invites per sender, what can that range from? It goes from 0 to what? It's not a percentage, so it's different. It's fundamentally different than the other metrics are. It may or may not be important that it's fundamentally different, but it's different. We're sitting here at 2.3. What's the max potential upside?
Number of friends.
Yeah, number of friends. Right. Some people have 100 friends, some people have 200 friends, 300 friends, right? So if it was 100, that'd be like, we can do a 50x thing on this thing, right? So, I don't know the exact number, but I'm a betting man. I'm willing to bet that's pretty good. That's pretty good odds that I can do something there. And so it's, and in some sense, it has a realistic constraint, but it's kind of unconstrained in one sense if somebody has a lot of friends. So anyway, that's the one that we focused on for that reason. The other reason we focused on this, is there another difference between this one and this one that you can think of UX-wise? Yeah.
You may only get one shot at getting a user to invite, so you want to make that conversion.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think I've heard that point before. That's a good one. Any other reasons to go with this product change versus that product change you can think of? Yeah.
The way to get more people to invite their friends, that's a lot easier to implement. You just plug in an email or something.
Okay.
Rather than try to guide people to invite their
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yes?
It's kind of a network effect, so as you add more people on the invites, then that's a new user who can potentially add more.
Right, yeah. Cool. Last answer.
Well, the amount of effort to get someone to invite people is harder than getting them to decide on how many people actually want to invite.
Yeah, I think so. I would paraphrase that a little bit to say, this is not changing user behavior. This is changing. For whatever reason, this 85% of people have decided, despite all your efforts to try to get them to invite their friends, they've decided not to. And so this involves trying to be more persuasive on that 80. Here it's just like, hey, they're inviting people anyway. Let's just make it easier for them to invite more. So, in general, changing user behavior can be tough. So above and beyond the upside potential, that was the other reason. Okay, so how can we improve it? How can we increase the average number of invites? So let's brainstorm the ideas and go through it. So what we did, this sounds, everyone does this now, but back in 2004, at that point in time, you literally had to type in your friends' email addresses. No wonder it's only 2.3 on average, right? People are tired of typing things out. Huh? Oh, okay. Ooh. Really? I have a little more than that. Is that okay? I'll go fast. I'll go really fast. No more questions. We'll go fast. So we basically did an address book importer. And at that point, you had to do one for each different thing. And it's basically Yahoo was the most prevalent again, so we did that. So we were tracking along at 2.5 baseline, 7-day average. We launched the result after 2 weeks of effort, and boom, we more than doubled it. So it's a 7-day average where it took time to get up there. So I was pretty pumped about that. Boom. Okay, cool. So just 2 more things left. 2 more topics left. We'll go fast. So that's a tough question. Now, we have all these metrics. Everyone loves, metrics, having tons of metrics. If you had to pick just one metric to measure your product market fit, which metric would it be? One metric to rule them all. Yell it out. Customer sat. Revenue. Okay, let's go. Yeah, I would do retention. Yeah, someone said that was retention. I didn't hear it first. Retention rate. That's what I would do, basically. So retention rate, what is that? You're basically saying, hey, when people sign up, as measured as the number of days or months or weeks since they use it, what percentage are still coming back and using the product? And it typically has has an initial gap. This is actually from Flurry for mobile, so it's really bad, right? Only 20% of people ever come back on for this mobile app they were looking at. And then it basically flattens way out, right? You can have different cohorts. This is the cohorts basically as you're looking at each of these guys. Hey, this is who signed up in January, this is who signed up in May, signed up whenever. And so these 3 cohorts, one started out higher but ended up lower. And so it's not immediately obvious which one of these you'd rather have necessarily, right? And basically, if you want to know how to track the data, sometimes people get tripped up on how to track it. You basically track each cohort on a row, and then basically the month that they've done since then. And so you get this triangle that ends up playing out, and you can kind of color code it to see that basically, look at our month zero retention rate is actually increasing from 24% to 41% over time. So we're doing a good job. This is a graph that I found. It illustrates exactly, in my mind, what improving product market fit is all about. It's about, you have to look down here to coordinate it, but this is basically January, February, March, April, May, June, July are the same, August. So what's going on? A higher percentage of people are sticking around at the same point in time over time. Basically, you're making your product better and better. You're improving your product market fit. And this actually comes from David Scott. He's a Matrix Partners. He has an awesome blog. I would recommend checking it out. Real quick, other ways to track retention. If you have more than 3, you start putting 100 cohorts, it's like you can't even make sense of it. So what you really want to have is some time series metric you can track over time. I think the simplest way is just pick a date, 30-day retention. Pick a day, 30-day retention. Basically, each day you're saying what percentage of users who signed up 30 days ago have come back since then. And if you want to track more than one, 30, 90 day, you can do it. Another really good metric is returning users. It's a good summary metric. It's how many users am I locking in through all my efforts, accumulating over time. It also gives you a sense of scale because it's not a percentage. But here I recommend using 7-day averages or 30-day or 60 so you can kind of get out any seasonality and see what's going on. Last one, profitability, anybody? That's what we're here. At the end of the day, your startup's got to get profitable. The 2 key metrics here are lifetime value and customer acquisition cost. You want lifetime value minus customer acquisition cost to be greater than 0. At the very beginning, we're Oprah worrying about product market fit, and then at the end of the day, we got to get to this. Lifetime value is basically how much value they create. It's average revenue per user times customer lifetime times gross margin. ARPU, hopefully most of you guys know what that is. It's total revenue divided by users. Lifetime is literally how many months is the average user generating revenue for you. If you know your churn rate, it's just 1 divided by that. And then gross margin just represents, hey, what percentage of our revenues are left over after we take out the cost of delivering the service. And then there are more complicated ones out there that have cost of capital. You don't really need to mess with that. CAC is basically how much it costs you to acquire a user. Cost per acquisition divided by conversion rate, basically, to get a paid user. And what you want to see over time is something like this. CAC, LTV bigger than CAC, and LTV going up over time and CAC going down. LTV increasing as you improve your value proposition, right? You're doing a better job on product market fit, retention, and pricing. And then your CAC is going down basically as you're doing a better job on your marketing, segments, channel messaging. Another thing you can do is actually take the ratio instead of the difference, and that's a powerful metric a lot of people look at. This is real data from HubSpot. You can see they basically grew it, steadily grew it, and actually more than doubled it, which is pretty impressive within a little over a year. So you can look at the ratio of LTV to CAC. Again, the summary of the process, just for reference, again, that's the process that we walked through with the examples. Quick plug, my client Medallia is in Palo Alto. They're a SaaS customer service company. They're hiring like crazy. So if you know anybody, director of product all the way down to PM, UX design, or engineering, come talk to me or just go. They're all posted on LinkedIn. So that's it, and I'll answer any questions. Are we okay on time? Okay, cool.
We have 10 minutes for Q&A.
Ken.
Yeah, great presentation.
Especially around the process. Can you talk about a little bit about tools?
Yeah, so it's funny because I didn't mention A/B testing or multivariate testing at all, right? And this whole thing, and that part of it is because I just want to focus on the discipline and philosophy of metrics. So there are definitely awesome tools out there to use. So a lot of people will use off-the-shelf stuff like. My friend works at a tool startup. He's like, no. What's it called again?
DataPad.
DataPad in beta.
Yep.
It's in beta. Okay. Well, anyway, so DataPad apparently is awesome. Luca's awesome, so it must be awesome by transitive property. But basically, there's like the lightweight A/B testing, like Optimizely and Google Website Optimizer. They changed the name of that now. Visual. So there's like on the marketing front, like for landing page optimization, those tools are awesome because the other thing that they do, I was just talking to Eric here, the head of product, and about something else, but it's related, is it decouples marketing from dev. It's not like, hey, dev, I have a little HTML, CSS change. Can you come in? They don't want to make it. You don't want to have to deal with the wait. So you do something like an optimize. Hey, can you just put this JavaScript in once and I'll never bother you again? Those are great for that. So they're great for landing page optimization. When it comes to integrating that JavaScript now with different permutations of your live, working, complex production product, it can get kind of complicated. And so what most people end up doing is some in-house A/B testing framework, a multivariate framework for that reason. So, those are some of the. I definitely would use Google Analytics to do some of the basic stuff, but eventually you have to do homegrown to do some of the more advanced stuff. Especially if you want lifetime value, you got to plug into whatever kind of revenue database you've got, or Salesforce, or whatever. So that's a high level on tools. Any other questions? Yeah.
I have a question about baseline metrics. So when you have, let's say, you're a new product, new service, and you don't have a lot of historical data, and the first thing your VP might say is like, oh, what is like our competitors doing? Well, you don't know. They're not going to give you the data.
Right.
So what is your sort of like a recommendation on like finding baseline metrics for?
Well, baseline. So there's two parts to this. Baseline is your baseline. So it's like, hey, we just launched. How many people are registering? How many people go to the reg page? Let's divide those two, figure out our registration conversion rate. So baseline is your metrics. Benchmarks is what I would call, if you want to know, hey, what are the other monkeys doing? Like, how are they doing on their reg? It's hard to get that data. Now, sometimes there's industry data out there you can find. It tends to be more financial, though, than UX related or key metrics. So I think the biggest focus is your own metrics over time, trying to improve your own metrics over time. You can talk to people in the industry and say, hey, our conversion rate's 2%. How does that sound to you? And they'll be like, well, ours is 15, And the interesting thing is the parallels don't have to be direct competitors. Like a registration conversion rate for a sign-up page, every freaking service on the web has it. It's not just your competitors. And so you can learn best practices. The other thing is if you have good UX heuristic people, they can look at it and go, oh, I see how that's going to improve the conversion rate because they're doing validation or they're doing bigger fonts or whatever they're doing. I don't think I think if you're trying to find competitive data, that's not, it sounds like you're maybe more in the Oprah world at that point because you don't have your own data in the Spock world. Yeah.
So you always showed experiments where the change was really huge, so you really could see a result, and you were sure that there is a result.
Yes.
I have the impression that most of the tests don't give a result or
That's
don't
right.
give a really small result.
Yes.
And how do you measure the small result?
Yes.
It's only 1%. You still want to take this percent, of course, but I can't see it in the whole.
So basically, so what you're talking about, so what I talked about is much more like we did a lot of pre-analysis to get that third type of profile of metric where it's like, hey, we know based on the analysis this is going to have a big pop and have a big leverage. Because A/B testing and multivariate testing is so easy these days, people are just like, yeah, let's just throw a bunch of stuff in there. Here we go. Yeah, and so that's, I think, why you get, for one reason, is why you get a lot of mediocre results. It's like, did anything beat the champion? No. Okay. Let's try green. It's like, let's try sign on instead of log on. And, it's just, the dial you're moving is really little. So how's it going to have a big impact on the needle? So that's, I think, one of the things. Certainly you could make bigger changes and have them not have an impact. You could have negative impact for sure. The biggest challenge when you have a small improvement, you're right. If it's a legit 1% gain, you want to lock that in. The challenge would be, you may need a lot of time, a lot of sample size to prove that it's statistically significant 1% versus not. And I think that, my other client, the CEO, we just got done doing product strategy planning, and he's like, okay, we want a mix of, this is a baseball analogy for people, the singles and doubles, like the 1% and 5%, but we also want home runs. And so I think, and it's easiest to get home runs at first. Once you kind of knocked all the home run optimizations out, now you're going to get diminishing returns no matter what. So I would say if you're early on only getting 1%, you're probably focusing too granularly and not thinking big enough about what you're testing. If you're at the mature part of the ROI curve, then it's just tougher, to come up with stuff. Yeah?
So I see a lot of like numbers, and realizing that they all impact the product and design. I'm wondering, how does that analysis happen, and what factors of the company might change that answer?
How does what analysis happen, just to make sure I understand your question?
Of, all the stock data becoming changes in the product and design.
Well, I think you saw in my examples, we started out actually with the current UX design. And in a sense, like, it was instrumented, and we got the analytics we needed for that. So basically, it starts with the current UX design, the live product. You instrument it, you look at the metrics, you say, hey, I think we can improve this and this. People are dropping off at this stage, so obviously there's a UX problem on that stage. So we need to redesign this page. That's where I think you need to switch over to the Oprah world and say, okay, we need to do usability testing to figure out what's wrong with this page. So, I mean, that's the logical flow of how you decide what changes to make that I've seen people follow. I've seen other people not follow that best practice and just make changes, and all of a sudden it's like metrics or the needles are going all over the place as people randomly. So part of it is like it's around a Six Sigma. You need the process to be under control. You need to be like, okay, this is baseline. Everybody take a chill pill. We're going to like control what we're going to launch, and you know what I mean? So if it's chaotic, maybe that's what you're getting at. If it's chaotic, there's constant change and things like that, it may be really tough. Now, some people evolve to the point of continuous integration, continuous deployment, and basically like well-defined metrics and dashboards, and so whenever they do a push and it drops some key metric, they do an automatic rollback. That's like advanced ninja kind of stuff. Not everybody's doing that. Most people. So maybe it's more the chaotic world is that what you're talking about? Yeah. Yeah, so it's a chaotic world. You need to reduce the chaos. That's what product managers do. We're anti-chaos devices. That's what we are. Yeah.
So recently finished reading the Lean UX book.
Yeah. Which one?
The O'Reilly book.
There's two. Client and clients? Or?
I think so.
Okay, cool.
So final part of that, they talked about really integrating that process in a 2-week sprint concept.
Yes.
And they're doing like 2 week of this.
Right.
In your experience, is that kind of a timeline actually possible to get real data and to turn around and design and to actually push it out to deploy, or you're kind of doing that in short periods and then you're doing more refinement improvements back in?
So that's what people aspire to do. Yeah. That's what one of my clients I'm at, I'm helping them try to do that basically. And so the dev team is on a 2-week cadence. And on any given iteration, some of the PM UX counterparts are able to keep up and some aren't. The one that is able to keep up with no problem is unique in that they've created their own A/B testing sandbox. So if you've created this ninja thing I'm talking about, if you've created an A/B testing sandbox, then you can do it. So I think part of it is there's different challenges in getting that velocity to match the velocity of the teams. One is just the velocity of if you have to do wireframes and things like that and design. I don't think that's the big bottleneck. The big bottleneck is usually like, do we have, like the second we roll out the change, do we have good analytics? Do we have good metrics? Like, did we instrument it right? Can we answer the questions? Are we like paralyzed because we have these questions and we don't have the data to answer it? Usually that's it, or some kind of like collaboration issues where the data resides over here and you can't get it, and things like that. But it is possible. The other thing I would say is, if you're going to be anti-chaos, you got to be pragmatic too, there's this train metaphor, which is, hey, the train's leaving the station every 2 weeks. Maybe the Lean UX stuff doesn't feed into every single train. It's okay if there's a bug fix train, and we'll take that breathing room to come up with a better design. At the end of the day, it depends on the magnitude of the UX design change. If we're tweaking some layout or tweaking some font or obviously we can do it. If it's like, oh geez, that whole page is messed up, you don't want to do a quick and dirty redesign. And so maybe you need to wait 2 or 3 trains before you get it in. And so that's the planning process. It's really the challenge is the cross-functional planning of, okay, guys, we're going to need an extra break. You guys do some non-UX stuff in the next train. And doing that, telling them early enough before they're already started working on the stuff and going, what? Oh, we're already working on this stuff. So it's really that coordination. Does that help? Yeah. All right.
So one more question.
Okay, one more question.
So is the conclusion from that then you have kind of a nice loop with brainstorm ideas, figure out which ones have high ROI,
yes,
design and implement,
yeah.
But what's actually happening is you either have a couple of these loops going on at once, so the teams that are doing designing and implementing kind of always have something to do next, or you're assuming that there are other things outside of that cycle that they also...
There have to be. This is just metrics optimization work. So you have a pie chart of your product roadmap, if you will. You're not going to be doing all this. Like, it depends where you're at. If you're like V1, it's like, we're 4 key features behind our competitor. You know, the CEO's not going to go, oh, you have a 5% improvement thing? Cool. You know, they're going to be like, we're getting killed on sales calls. Let's get these features out. So it's kind of, it's a luxury, not a luxury, but again, it's the right thing at the right time. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a mix. So it's a mix. And then basically like, it's diminishing returns. So the better, the funny thing is, the better you do on these metrics, once they get like kind of up there, you're going to go work on other stuff because they're kind of good to go.
The other way to mention it is, even out of all of the stuff on this slide, it is generally never the only thing you're doing.
Yes. Unless you are evolved to the point of having a analytics group or like growth hacker group, and they just go, and that's what they focus on. And certain companies have gotten to that point and done that.
But then you probably have to run a couple at a time.
Yeah, and then you have a big team and they're doing, but what's going on then is like the other feature teams aren't working on metrics. This one team is just like, we're all about the metrics. So, all right, cool. So I'll be around if you want to ask questions that later. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, this, you know, there's my Twitter handle, and that's the SlideShare. Like I said, all my stuff's on SlideShare. I'll put this up on SlideShare.
Awesome. And like every speaker at Products That Count, Dan put together original content. So thank you. That was really cool. The next talk is next month on March 19th. Lada Adamik, who's a data scientist at Facebook, is going to talk about how information spreads on Facebook. If you want to hear about it, sign up for our newsletter on productsthatcount.com. What I want to do now is have a few minutes for everyone who wants to do a shout out to come up here. You have 10 seconds to pitch your startup, tell us about your skills if you're looking for a job or if you're hiring. So feel free to line up here and we'll do these shout outs. And then after the shout outs, there'll be some time for networking. And for those of you who are night owls, we are probably going to go out for drinks afterwards, so just hang around.
Hi, everybody. My name is Luca. I'm the Director of Product Management for a company called DataPad. We are building a agile analytics tool to do exactly the kind of work that Dan was talking about. I'm looking for beta testers. We are in private beta. And if you want to try something new and for free, we are giving away a year of free use for a tool for whoever provides feedback. So, see me.
Hi, everyone. My name is George Martinez. I just graduated with my MBA in Entrepreneurship and Finance. I currently do catastrophe analytics, helping an insurance company manage their natural and man-made risk. However, I'm looking to transition into the health tech space. So any organization that's trying to help people live healthier, active lifestyles, if you're interested, I'm looking to transition. Thanks.
Any other shout outs? All right, well, there's more beer and pizza, so see you over there. Thanks, everybody.